I think we could start. People are still joining in, but I think we could just start with the interest of time for everyone. So, hello everyone. I'm Dhanesh, and thanks for joining. Thanks for signing up for this and waiting. It was a long wait for me, at least, when I planned to do this initially. So, what I want to cover today, right? So, I've seen people during interviews. Can you all hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So I've seen during the interviews, I've seen during the different interactions with people at different, people irrespective of where they are working, what level they are working, they're not much well versed with the lot of concepts, concepts around how the websites work or concepts around how the database works. And there are now so many databases coming in, but your basic writing SQL is now becoming a mandatory kind of a skill set for almost all job roles. And I also seen people who are from college, just freshers starting out. They also struggle with a lot of basic questions, even the SQL query writing, right? So that shouldn't happen because nowadays writing a SQL on a database has become a mandatory kind of a skill. That is something that everyone expects you to do, out of the box, irrespective of what kind of role you are in and what kind of database you are actually accessing. So what I did was I had this. So you can see my screen, right? So I had this one little session planned for a long time back. So I was just thinking, okay, what can be done for this kind of a thing, and I had this some just basic things covered for this session, our own session here, and I'm just going to touch base upon, like, I'm irrespective of who you are, like what you are working on. I'm there. I've seen people from fresher to even experience levels signing up for this session, so I'm going to be considerate of that, and I'm going to talk about the things in such a manner that it is like makes sense for to everyone. So I'm going to start with a lot of basics thing. So forgive me if you think this is a repetition of what you already know, but I'm going to start with a lot of basic thing, and maybe this session just will touch base upon the basic parts only. Advanced are not right now in here. We also have time constraints, so let's get started. Okay, so here is right. What is a database? We think of a database in terms of technology, right? But really, if you think broadly, what really is a database? It's just an organized collection of structured information data and electronically store. This is what is definition from Wikipedia. You'll see. But what really that means? So even if before databases or before the technology came into picture, the database still existed. There are people who were using books, for maintaining their accounts or just keeping a diary, or people maintaining using physical books for some of the other purposes, for writing recipes. If you have seen the my mom used to do that. She used to write recipes in on the books all the time, and used to watch the Sanjeev Kapoor show. Whether she cooked it or not, that's a different story. But she used to write, and there are a lot of things that people used to write down into books, watching TV, going to seminars and here and there. That book itself, it was a database, database of the same information that you will store in any other modern databases. So yes, that was a database. So the definition of database system has become with the addition of electronically store, but rest all things are same, right? You'll organize your things, like if you're writing a diary, you're writing a journal yourself, you organize the things day by day, hour by hour. Or if you are, say, in a college, in a class, in a lecture, you're taking notes, you will write the things, note, class by class, day by day kind of a thing. That's still an organized information for you. It's not electronically stored. It's not into a database system. That's why we just don't call it database, we call it a book, but it's still a database. Why do we need an electronically stored database, right? So jumping on the next part, why really do we need that? So if you look at all the things in the world that are digital, they thrive upon one thing. The nowadays data has become so important. but they really thrive upon one single thing: the number of users coming to them and the value that they provide to the users. So how would they know how many users are coming in and what value really to provide them? First, they need to understand, what are the demands. If whoever is coming in, what are they doing? And for that, they have to store every single item. What is happening with their system somewhere. That's why the data storage, has to be in picture. Like they have to store that information, that data, those key points somewhere. So we need a database system because we want to store that thing. Secondly, when we have stored something in here and there, right? So it's not just the storage of the thing. We also want to manage it. So manage means we want to retrieve it when we want. We want to update it when we want. Maybe we don't want to keep the data like for say, for example, a 5-year-old data. We don't want to keep that. Suppose in that case, we want to remove that data without affecting all other records. That's why the data management is also important factor, and that's why we need a database. Third is security. So we have a lot of attacks on data, right? A lot of attacks on system. There are people who do this for a living, the hackers, and they will keep on doing this. So we want our information, our data, which is so valuable for a company because they want to understand and bring value to customers. So security becomes very, very important. And that one piece of security can be addressed by a separate system like a database management system. So data security is important. And finally, integrity. What does integrity means here is, you are doing something, mm, you are updating something, you are inserting something, you are adding new records, you are updating old records, you are doing some changes here and there, but you are not really affecting the whole system itself. You're just affecting the one row in between. That's it, or that particular record, or some set of records. So, if for example you have a sales data of India, for India, you have a product that you're selling in India, and you have a sales data for it. Now, for every single state in India, the requirement or the way they work could be different. So your sales data would have data state-wise. There would be something called as region where they are selling it, and state would be different. So what applies to a southern state may not apply to a northeast state. But if you're doing something in the southern state data, that should not really directly impact with the northeast side data. You are using, everyone is familiar with Dish TV and Tata Sky and all those things, right? So you would have seen when you go to recharge it, you see South India and rest of India mentioned there. Why is that? So it could be because of some legal things in the southern states. It could be because of the demand of the customers in the southern state, and rest of India is very different. That's why these kind of things are there. So that integrity is very important, and that really is one of the why should we use a database system. We need database systems for storage of data, management of data, security of the data, and integrity of the data. Uh, so how do we use a database management system, right? So there are different ways to use a database management system, definitely, depending on what are you doing with it. So if you are a business analyst, or if you are just right someone who wants to uh, query the data here and there, just want to see what is really happening with the data, you would use a client, a database client. So if you're familiar with different database clients, there are, say if you're using a MySQL, you'll have a MySQL client. If you have a Oracle, you will have an Oracle client. If you are using something like a, nowadays their data is on the cloud, so you'll probably be using a cloud, the web browser version of some client to access that data. Maybe there is another version of client in which you can access multiple forms of databases. Like say, for example, you're using a DBWare, a client, then you'll be able to access Oracle, MySQL, and all of the other things from just one single client. So you will access data through the database client. Other way of accessing the data is through drivers. So even the clients need database drivers. So drivers are the middleware, you can say, which sits between the OS and the applications that are accessing the data. So every database system would have a driver for it. So when they create a new database, they'll send out a driver which will say, okay, here is our driver. Use it in your machine. Of course, free of course, most of the things will be, and you can build a client on top of it or use our client on top of it. And the third most important way of accessing the database system is through API layer. So if you're familiar with Twitter, right? The Twitter has a very popular API service in which they provide their API data, the Twitter data, free to everyone. So you can go to Twitter, sign in as a developer, and you can pull their tweets from all around the world for everyone. And you can do whatever you want to do with that. You can do research. You can just build another Twitter client for yourself or anything that you want to do. So how they are doing it? So what they have done is they have created an API layer, uh, a, a program on top of their database, and they have exposed it to the public usage. So that's what the API layer is. So nowadays, few databases that are on the cloud, you can access them from their web browser as well as you can access them through their API layer, right? Okay. And so right? So which is a very big thing. Which database system? So now we know that what is a database system. We know why we want to use a database system. We know how to use a database system. But the which database system to use is such a big question that it is still needs to be answered over and over again, and people has to look into their requirement. There's a lot of things. So for this, you have to just understand few things. What is a database system? That particular kind of a database system doing for you. Now, say for example, you have a single application. You're just maybe doing your own project, and you just want to store the data somewhere. Maybe you just want users to log in and log out and do things on your website. You need just user information to be stored. So maybe you only need a single table or couple of tables in your database. That kind of thing can be done through files also. You could just go around and just write the usernames and passwords in separate files and maintain them. That should also work for you. That itself becomes a database for you. So it's not necessary that you really go and use some database system that is there in the market. You can just use any sort of thing that works for you, and files are one of them. Secondly, you can just use a relational database. I mentioned the first one, right? So this is what the traditional system is. So when you want to go beyond files, you will look for things that are there as a database system. What we have learned over the years is a database system. So all the examples that comes to your mind first off, Oracle, DB2, or MySQL, Postgre, all of these are relational databases. So what does it mean by a relational database? The data is stored uh, in the system uh, in a related manner. Like there are multiple tables, and there is some relationship between one and other table. It always there with even for other databases, but just the way it is stored, it is always being called as a relation database. So let me just show you something here. So this is a sample of data, wherein maybe it's a sales data. I just downloaded it from the internet. So a lot of things in this training you'll see directly pulled from the internet, and that's fine, I guess. So say there is a product, being sold for so and so price in so and so country, and when it was sold. This is a data, right? This is an Excel sheet. This can be a database. This is a database. But say, for example, now if I want to maintain product names separately, maintain country names separately, and use this table, right? So I know that, okay, this still is the same data, But here we are now maintaining a relation between them, that my product is sold from this country and this is my sales. So that those three different entities become my relational database, and I can push this relational database information into any MySQL or any Oracle or any other system, and that's the first part. Where did it go? Okay, sorry. That's the first part of which database to use, right? Relational database. So traditionally, how do we access data from the relational system? We access it through a SQL query language, SQL, and we write SQLs, and we know this is what I talked about earlier, that people are struggling to write good SQLs, right? Sometimes, because they don't know how the data is stored underlying. That's a different thing, but we'll come to that. So, how do we access data traditionally in relation systems is through SQL query language, and that's what the relational database RDBMS is all about. All the different flavors of and different technologies of database management systems use standard SQL most of the time with their own proprietary commands, functions, and everything put on top of it. So if you have a query that is ANSI compliant, ANSI, and ANSI compliant SQL you have written in Oracle, if you have the same kind of a data in, say, a MySQL, that query will run in MySQL without any issue, because both of these are ANSI SQL, which is a standard which guidelines the whole how do you create and execute a SQL statement in a database system. How it is executed underlying and internally is a proprietary thing maybe, but how do you write a query, a SQL, is not. So the SQL would work in across databases which support ANSI standard. Then what comes a NoSQL? So if I say relational tables are the ones that uses SQL to interact with data, so NoSQL becomes the systems that do not use SQL to interact with data, right? So what are these databases? Now these are mentioned here also. You can see, document, graph, key value. All these are examples of NoSQL databases, and this is the thing that is really has been picking up over the years for many years now. Examples of these kind of systems are, you have if you have heard about Hadoop or Hive, if you have heard about services like BigQuery, Snowflake, or Redshift, if you have heard about MongoDB, Cassandra, CouchDB, all these are examples of NoSQL. Now some of them do execute SQL statements too. So, like for example, if you're on BigQuery or Snowflake, you can write an ANSI compliant SQL statement, and that would work just fine on those systems. But that doesn't mean those are like just relational RDBMS systems, relational or the RDBMS system, the traditional systems. No, they are not. Those are evolved. Those have evolved from NoSQL, and they have the SQL interface just to expand their market. So NoSQL databases, what they do is, along with the traditional data, the data like this, where data is stored in different tables. So here, let me just, okay. So here, if I have a product table, if I have a country table, and if I have a sale tables, right? Sales table, and maybe yeah, that's it. So these three tables, right? These three as a table can go into any system, and even in NoSQL, what would happen is this will go inside it. Now, if suppose with this data, I also want to capture what the user has done in that particular session before buying this product. Okay, so if this is a website which is selling so and so product, and I want to capture like where has the user been. If suppose I'm running in Amazon.com and I see that user has bought a mobile phone, but I want to know that before buying a mobile phone for last 1 week, where that user has been on Amazon.com. know, what all things he browsed and browsed, and what he bought finally. And that is very difficult to put in a single table, right? That information would contain, he went from OnePlus to Redmi to OnePlus again, look for black variant, white variant, red variant of each of the phones. Maybe went to some other brand, looked through the price listing, all those stuff. All of the things that you guys or anyone do while shopping online, that can go into that. So how do you capture this level of information and associate with a transaction like buying a mobile phone? Now, the way to do is this is definitely captured. This is definitely there with Amazon.com, like what you do each and every time you do. But this is stored in different format, and many times the format is JSON format. So what is JSON format is? It stores value. So just to give you an idea what JSON format is, right? So this is JSON format. You can see on the right side, things are stored like this. What this mentioned in the object, right? The things are stored like this. So there is the curly braces open and close. In between, there is a lot of data, and those things, that kind of JSON format, if you want to store somewhere, which can be a huge document in itself, needs a different kind of uh, representation in database. You could definitely think that I can store JSON format like a big text, but it's not just storing of the JSON format. It also is about retrieving. So if suppose someone is writing a SQL on top of it and want to make sense of the scenario what we talked about, how the mobile phone before being sold, what has have been happening on the site. If I want to know that, I have to write a code to interact and make sense of that JSON format also. That JSON format has to be stored in a way that is understood by the system while retrieving it. And that's what is this NoSQL is about. You know, They would allow you to interact with the system irrespective of what kind of data is stored inside. And one of the data types are JSON format, what I just mentioned. So so yes, so JSON. So this is what the NoSQLs are about. You can traditionally parse a JSON format using a SQL statement, but you could be able to do it with extended functionality of NoSQL databases. Now I mentioned JSON format as a document. That's what the document is about. Where the things are stored not as the rows and columns and tables, but as JSON format documents in the database. That's an example of a document database. A cloud database is just an open term, which is I just put in there. But any database can go on to cloud, go on to a cloud service and become a cloud database. Honestly, so MySQL version of a cloud database is already there. Amazon, AWS has it, Google Cloud has it. A SQL server, if you have, it's there in the cloud as a service. So cloud databases are there. Columnar database. Now that's a very fascinating thing about columnar databases. So what has been happening is you have a lot of data, right? So when you have a lot of data, you do a lot of churning of the data. You do a lot of analysis of the data. And at the end of the day, what happens is you have to write a lot of analytical functions. Now, what does analytic function means is that you write a lot of um, sum of this column, average of this column. You do a lot of count of these columns, and so on and so forth. So usually, what happens is the way you see this current data here, right? Say this whole one row. It might be possible that exactly this is how the data is stored physically on your disks. So this is my first row. Then this entire first row will be stored like this on disk. Second row comes in, it is stored here like this. So if this is my memory locations, like say memory location M1, M2, and so on. So this is how the consecutive memory locations are written. So that entire row is stored together. So what happens here is when I'm retrieving this row, so irrespective of how many columns I select, once my pointer has went to M1, I could fetch this consecutively and show this one row. Uh, Let me take a break before I go to column number one, right? So just tell me if you have any questions right now. Otherwise, what will happen in our session is we might not be able to interact because if it's time, then we'll probably will log off later on. So if you have any questions till now, mm, maybe you can put in there or just unmute yourself and talk. No problem. All good?
Yes, all good.
Okay. Okay. So reason why I broke right now because you see this memory locations and what I'm talking about, right? I'm just assuming that you know about this. Let's just think this as a page number in your book, where you are going to write this single row data in single page. So you have a page one, say maybe page one, page two, page three. So what happens is if you're once you are on that particular page, you have the entire row. You can select as many columns as you want from this, right? So that's what the memory is about. The problem with this is if I wanted to do a sum of these two values, right? If I want to do a sum of units sold amount, then I will have to go to two different pages, right? So this is page 4 and page 5 for the first row, right? So I'll have to go to two different pages, right? So this one is on the page 1. How this is actually represented is like this. This is on the page 1 and this is maybe on the page say 77. So I'll have to go to page 1 and page 77, copy or store this somewhere and do a sum of these two things. That's how the relational databases work. They go to different memory locations and whatever you have written, let's say you have written a sum of sales, they will pick all those sales values from different locations and store it somewhere temporarily and then show it to you. The problem with this, you can see obvious, is that if you have like millions of rows that you have to sum, then because all of the things are stored as a row pointer, so start of the row is page 1, start of the row is page 77, maybe some page say 1 million, something like that, then the problem is imminent. You can't go all these pages. If you can definitely go, but it's not efficient, it's not fast, and it restricts the user's ability to do more and more analysis on top of the data. So what new idea came in, like the columnar databases here, what they do is instead of putting the onus on the page the so here I'll just show it to you guys. So with the same row, right, same two rows, if you have to do, instead of storing them as start of the row as here p1 p77, what they do is they store all the columns together. Instead of putting all the rows together, entire row together, they put entire column together. So this is also my p1, p2, p3, p4, p5. So they store this row together. So what happens if once say on page 5 you have all the data about your sale price, then you can just sum the whole page and you can show it that okay, you wanted sum of page sale price, this is it. So what this allows you to do is, even if you like have millions and millions of rows, my sale price, my unit cost is stored together. So I just have to reach that first point and then sum all the other things. Now say here I wanted to do a sum of sale price, right? Say gross sales, and I have to also do a sum of discounts. I could just easily do it, just like here, like Excel. I have reached to H12. This is my Excel value right here. I have reached this point, and I just do sum of all the other things below it. That's it. That's my sum here on the right. This is the example of storing the data in a columnar system. Otherwise, what I have to do is I have to go here, row 13, take this somewhere, copy paste somewhere, then go here, then go here, then go here. That is not required. I have stored everything together in a columnar database. So the sum, average, all those things I can do on top of it very effectively, very easily, and very efficiently. That is what the columnar database is all about. And there are a lot of databases that are columnar database nowadays. The document based databases do this columnar database storage in their actual physical storage. So a MongoDB, Cassandra will do it. If you are familiar with BigQuery, BigQuery is a columnar database. If you're familiar with SAP HANA, HANA is a columnar database. So they store their data in this such manner that performing some operations, performing average, performing all those analytical operations on top of the data is easier and is very, very performant. So it's easy as well as efficient, fast, and that's what it's all about. It's not a transaction database, right? So one thing we didn't talk about is an OLAP and OLTP system. So an OLAP system and OLTP system. So if you have heard about these two terms, so what the like for example, let's keep the example of Amazon.com or Amazon.in. So when you are actually interacting with the system, the data that is being stored for that website is stored on a OLTP system. The database is an OLTP for performance database, where the data is actually for a transactional system, where user comes in and does some transactions and all the stuff. So it is meant to serve a transaction. But when you want to do this kind of analysis, the data is copied to somewhere else, which is an analytical system, which is an OLAP. So on that analytical system, the data might be stored in a different way, modeled in a different way, but the underlying thing remains the same, that it could also use a different database as in, say for example, if Amazon is using an Oracle system for their transactional exercises, they may be using an AWS Redshift for their analytical purposes, because the data stored here is relational and data stored there is a columnar database, which is more supporting to the kind of queries the uh, queries the customer wants to execute on top of it. So that's what the columnar database is. Wide columnar, you can think of it, right? So many columns will be there. There won't be any breaking down of tables. So we broke down table into product, country, and sale. But it could happen that you just want to keep the things as is. So here, right, what the original Excel denoted, whole thing is stored just like that. No breaking down into pieces. Correct. That is the wide columnar kind of a thing, where you don't really break down anything there. Key value pair is very interesting, and I'm pretty sure every one of you who have done any amount of programming is familiar with this. So if you have uh, used, say for example, just your config files, an example of any config file, right? So if you're uh, just using background color equal to red, that background color equal to red is your key pair, right? You have a key where you say what is the background color is key, and what's its value, red. Correct. So you are probably have text files written like that, or you are, if you are using some modern systems, you will probably be using YAML or TOML formats. So what's the YAML format? If I can just quickly show it to you. So this is a YAML format where it says, skills. So this is a nested thing, but if you just can see this, right? This is a name, job, skills. This is a this is an example of a key value pair where my name is my key and value is Tipata. Job is my key, developers is my value. So you would have definitely seen key value pair. Now there are databases that actually function in that particular manner. Thing like data store, things like DynamoDB on AWS. Those are entirely based on key value pairs. So whatever you throw into it as a data is stored as a key and a value. Like for example, in this our example, country will be my key, Canada will be my value. Now you'll say what happens if I have, say, for example, here India in a third row, right? So country one, Canada, country two, Canada, country three, India. That's how the things are stored in a key value pair internally at a very high level. I'm not accurate here in terms of real, the storage might be different, but this is how it is at a very high level. My key is country and my value spans across all these things. And that's interesting thing about key value pair. A document we talked about. Graph databases are very unique. So we have a product, we have a country, we have sales, right? We are just joining them, saying that okay, my sale happened in this country for this product. But graph databases go beyond that. So uh, they are also storing the relations between these tables as a separate thing. And this is graph databases are primarily used for social networking. Uh, I'm not going to go any further in graph database. It's a very big topic. But just think of this as a very unique case of using graph database, right? So if you are building some application and you are thinking, okay, I need any database and doesn't matter, don't go for graph because graph database is a very unique application, and you should just stick to the its application if you are really you use graph database only if, say for example, you really need that kind of a database which is more of a social network or a networking based uh, database. Time series, just it flows across time, like so. There's nothing much. There's no really uh, databases around that, but still, um, and there's a very big advantage here of all other databases. Why all these other databases exist apart from relational? One thing was what we talked about was having uh, a JSON like data stored, having some other kind of forms of data stored. Maybe you want to store a picture, or maybe you want to store a video. Those kind of things are better supported by others, right? Or maybe performing analytical operations in the columnar database. But there's one more use case why all of these database exist. And the big advantage of the document or key value pair databases over the relational databases. And the biggest advantage is this. Now, if suppose, for example, you have sales data like this, right? So I was talking about having a table. Like, say, for example, I have, let me clear this out. Okay. So if you think about it like this, right? So if you have, say, a student table, and let's say it's like, it has an ID, name, address, phone, whatnot, right? If you had a student table now, or say, let's make it on a big scale. Let's say it's a citizens table, okay, a citizen table. So we are having a unique ID for a citizen. If someone is really maintaining, if suppose someone is really maintaining, and it would have for us, it will have billions of rows, right? in this table, and everyone will have an ID, will have a name, will have address, maybe have a phone number, maybe not. Maybe they're using phone numbers for this and everything. Now think this: what would happen if there is a table which has billions of rows? Maybe history is maintained in this table, where people say, their address changes are also captured, their phone changes are also captured. you know Maybe they move from one city to other city, change their phone numbers, so their phone numbers are also captured. So probably for one, so say for example, there is 1 billion rows, 1 billion citizens, and for everyone at least five history records are stored. At least five history records are stored. So it makes it like 5 billion records, right? Now if you want to do something about this table, like say I have introduced a new thing called Aadhaar, right? Aadhaar came into picture as a enforcement recently, maybe in a few years back. Now I want to add a column as say Aadhaar. Now adding this column, you might think, it's just an alter statement, or no, just a simple statement. Just I have to run it, but no, that's not the case. If you are on a transactional system and you are running creating a new column on top of it, or say for example, the phone number was a 10 digit and suddenly it has become 11 digit because we exhausted all the numbers. So we'll have to update this column type to be a 10 to 11, right? So this kind of things that are updating or adding a metadata to the table doesn't work efficiently in relational tables, and this is a cause of big concern for all of them who are using relational tables, that adding any new thing is a very difficult thing. But if you look at key value pairs, right? So for key value pairs, it's there's no change. So if I add Aadhaar today, okay, just add Aadhaar, just say Aadhaar value and your Aadhaar number. That's it. If you have want to phone from 10 to 11, go there, no problem. Just put a new phone number. Or if you say, for example, in JSON document, you're talking about JSON document here, right? So an example, maybe show you an example here. You could see here something like this, right? This is the lowest level you can see in here. Now acronym, whatever it is, right? So if I wanted to add a new column here, what I would do is I'll just add it. That's it. I'll not do anything else. I'll just add it. I'll just say new column, and that's it. I just add it. So I don't have to manage my metadata in any way, and you know think about what would happen if I add anything, what would happen if I alter anything. And this is true for your key value databases, your document databases, JSON based databases and all. And the this is a very big advantage. uh, how big this advantage is, I'll just give you an example. This example was still related to something that is traditionally possible, a citizenship management thing. But think of a system which is like a social network. Think of a system which is like having a game. There's hundreds and hundreds of games out there. So every game, you can't define a particular database or a column table kind of a thing for a game, because they have to add so many things all the time. They have to innovate so many things all the time. They might have to capture, like say, 10 things today from the user. Tomorrow it could be like 25 suddenly. And if they go on maintaining it in a relational table, their system will go nowhere. And that's why they usually prefer things like MongoDB, Cassandra, and all those stuff, so that they could expand and compress as they need. So there is no really the maintenance of the metadata is not an issue at all for them. They don't even think about it. honestly. That's a very big advantage of having a non-relational databases. So if you're thinking like you're building a system which is you don't know how many columns you will need today. You just know like I know today that I need 20 columns, but tomorrow I don't know how many columns I will need. Then go for a something like a MongoDB. No? Use that. Don't use a traditional system. There are disadvantages because you have to retrieve them in a very specific way. Not all NoSQL databases support ANSI SQL standards, so you'll have to interact with them in a very different way. But then it could be trade off that you have to do based on what kind of application you are going to build. Okay, I think another just quick time for questions. No? Okay. Okay. I think this is self-represented, right? This is how the things are. We have a database. You could have an application, and this is your application itself. Application could be installable on your system or a web-based system application, anything. Okay, the key concepts, right? This is very interesting. And so when you create a table, right? We want to the biggest requirement for when you create a table is that you want to uh, have every row represent a single transaction. So if you're like bought a phone, you want to just say, okay, this user bought a phone. That's my single transaction. And for that, you need something to identify your uh, row uniquely. And that's where the concept of keys come in. The keys help the system to identify that particular row uniquely. Now, even if I say a row in this concept, this still applies to even for a non-SQL databases to some extent. Because in modeling or in data representations, you'll always talk about things in terms of keys. Even if say you are talking about something in a JSON format, right? But you also want still in a JSON format, there's a unique row or unique data is still important to have. So you'll have some columns, keys that would represent a unique information about that particular document or table. So primary key, right? So instead of doing this, just make it a little faster. What we'll do is hold on, just go to this particular site. Let's go there and think. Let's go through the key concepts and normal forms together. So when you see the keys, right? So keys are required because you want to model the data in a particular way. So a primary key, right? A super key, a candidate key, a composite key. All these are different kind of keys that you think of. So, for example, here, if I'm building a product database, then I will have a product ID, which would be my primary key. If I have another table called as product category, say I have so product would have a mobile phone, a mobile version, like say Redmi XY something. So my category would be mobile, right? This would also have a category ID. So here, for with product ID, I'll also store a category ID. So if I have two different tables, in case I have two different tables, if I have just one table, then what I will do is I will have a product ID. I'll just say mobile. I'll say Redmi XY. This is a single table, right? But I have a category in it. So why I'm talking about this? Because if I have this kind of a thing, then product key is my primary key. I have this kind of a thing. What is my category ID here? So say this red XY is also a name of say some tablet, a tab. That case, category ID or knowing what category it is important because the mobile red XY is different from a tab red XY. That's why this category ID will help me to uniquely identify that record, right, of the product. So my category ID is my foreign key. So a category ID in this table is a primary key for product category. But when this category ID is pulled into a product table, it is a foreign key for the product table. Okay. So if you think of like, uh, let's go to some other places. Uh, Candidate key. Okay, candidate key is like how many different combinations of key, right? So a candidate key you could have like say uh, you have a table that has lot of columns in it, and say column number one is primary key, but you could use column number one, two, and three to uniquely identify record also. Maybe you could use three, four, and five columns to uniquely record identify record. So all those combination of columns that you can use to uniquely identify a record are your candidate keys, candidates for your unique identification of the records. And some of them you would choose as your actually primary key sometimes, that those are called composite keys. So things that you'll definitely use for identifying the uniqueness. A non-key attributes are just all the other columns, right? So if the in our case here, if I have a price, that's my non-key attribute, right? So why I'm just running through this is because uh, people who have registered, I had a free text in there asking them about what they would like to see in this session, and there are a lot of things about normalization. You know, the normal forms, different normal forms, and it's a very big concept, and I want to just cover and for everyone's interest. That's why I'm just here. And there's one more thing I want to cover after that. So a normal form, right? So I want to talk about normal forms in a little fast. This I'm not going to go in detail about the type of keys. And as here, I'll tell you what the normal forms are. Okay, so leave these first things. Okay, there are different kinds of normal forms. Just incremental 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, BCNF and all. This example that we had of financial data, which is just a pure Excel, and every single thing right in here is like this. So there is no separate table for any other thing. You could simply think this as a base, collection of data, zero normal form. I mean, in this case, I'm just taking an example from one website. A student there, we have a roll number for the student, name, and subjects. Okay. So this is my student table, and this is my sample data. This will be my zero normal form. Now, what should be one normal form is, it contains an atomic value, it says, right? That means that each table should contain a single value. So every record needs to be unique here. So because I have a different roll number, right? Even if I have same name and same subject for someone here, but if I have a roll number as 104, this makes it a unique record. That's it. There is no other requirement for one normal form, right? Even if they say subject, if I decide to have subjects like this, then this is my one normal form, where I have split C and C++, you can see here. That's your I have one normal form. Problem with this is very visible in say for example I want to change the subject, right? I moved from one class to other, and I have cleared my first year. I want to go to second year. I want now don't want to see Java. I want to maybe do a Python. So I change it. The problem happens is someone has to go here in this record and update it, right? Now that is looking easy in here because we have less number of rows. But if you think of a system, this is not really a good thing to do, where you have to go and update so many things for so many, just because you have just updated a subject, right? So you don't want to do that way. So that's why the second normal form came into picture. What two no, NF or second normal form says is, if you have a data which is atomic like this, then single column primary key that does not functionally depend on the subset of the candidate key. This is a requirement. So I just highlight this. This is where the keys, primary key and candidate key comes into picture, right? What we just talked about in a very fast way. A primary key is used, a single key that is uniquely identifying the data, and candidate key is other options of how to uniquely identify that particular record, right? So here I have this data: student ID, name, registration number, branch, address. This is my everything here is a unique, right? You can see everything here is unique. Subject is there. Now subject 1, 2, 3. But now if I have, I don't definitely want to have the score, right? So if I have a score database like this, which is score, student, subject, marks, and teacher who scored it, right? What happens here is, even though I'm uniquely identifying this record, this column teacher is not functionally dependent on other things. So a student ID, score ID, student ID and subject ID and marks are uniquely identify this record enough, right? Teacher does should not be doing that. So here what happens is, that's why this teacher can go in a separate table as a teacher's table, maybe teacher ID and something like that, and that would make it as a two normal form, second normal form. So you break a table down into multiple tables and you reach a second normal form. That's what you do. Third normal form says that you have the table in second normal form, and tables in between do not have any transitive functional dependencies. Now, what is mean by transitive functional dependencies? Let me take you to this particular drawing here. Here is an example of transitive functional dependencies. So what this says, your total marks. So here you have a score, you have exam name and total marks in the same table. This is my one single table, right? But exam name and total marks are not depending on other things, right? So if I'm doing a subject, I might give multiple exams for that particular subject. It could be theory, it could be practical, it could be viva, something like that. And these two columns shouldn't be here actually. So then I'll break this down and put create a sub exam table, and I will reach a third normal form. That's what this is about. Then we have a boys code normal form. So this is an extension of third normal form. Usually, third normal form is enough for most of the work, but boys code normal form again has some more constraint on top of the third normal form, which it says if suppose A depends on B, Then where is it? Okay. So it says that if A depends on B, where your A is your super key, that is means that it has all the keys that are possibly there. Then for achieving that BCNF for that table, the table which is in 3NF, and for every functional dependency, your left hand side is a super key, the X. So what that means is you basically split the table again. That's it. You split the table again. So if you have this kind of data where you have employee ID, employee country, department type, and department number, you separate employee and department, because your candidate key, super key, right? All the uniquely identification of an employee should not be depend on the department. So department can change for an employee. That's why you separate out the tables. And now you could see that these two are independent of each other. But you use employee ID, you can use department ID into an employee table if you want to make the relation in between them as a mapping table. So you create a different table altogether which has the relation between these two. But so usually what we do is we keep employee department number in your employee table. You don't create a separate mapping table, but to achieve BCNF, you will do that. So it should be like employees should have their own table, department should have their own table, all other things should have their own table, and you create the mapping tables. Basically, BCNF does that in a nutshell, because they're looking for super keys always to be like employees key should be for the employee table, department keys should be in department table that way. Uh, I know I'm just rushing over the topics here, but don't have much option here. And final point I just wanted to talk about was writing SQL statements. And how do I go about it? I was thinking about it. How should I effectively tell you about how can you write SQL statements? But I think not really in detail, but at very high level, right? So if you talk about, we talked about foreign keys and primary keys, right? So here, if I have to write a SQL query on product and product category, how would I write it? So I should know for creating a SQL, I should know what's the primary key, what's the foreign key, and like that foreign key is for this particular table, right? So if I'm talking about just two tables, I have a category table, I have a product table. There is a category ID here, which is a category ID as foreign key. Then I would do a select, and I have all my columns here, whatever columns I want. I'll do from what? From my main table is my say product table, and this is product category. What is the main table? So my main table is usually the one that from which I want to extract maximum things, or which is driving my whole stuff. So from my product table, I want to join this product table. Right? I want to join. Keyword here is join. So I want to join this table with product category, and I will join it on the columns that are creating the relationship between these two tables. So the column is category ID on category ID. But just will have to use category IDs from both tables, right? So we'll use product category ID as well as product cat category ID, which means that select so and so columns from product table, join product category, and always give alias. You should give alias to the table names, because that will go a long way when maintaining the code. Like product as say P, R and PC that join on PR dot category ID equal to PC dot category ID. So using this join predicate is this ANSI SQL standard. You could write the SQL statement in a different way also, where you are not using the join condition. You'll just probably use it like a where condition. But if you follow this statement function, this kind of a statement using join condition, your SQL will run on all the databases efficiently, and this is a like kind of a standard nowadays for all of the ANSI SQL writing. So you can follow this. So the things that are there in a SQL statement is select from. Right? You will do a join on, go to where condition. Where condition is what? Say I want, say for example, all the uh, products which are of uh, category where you have the category mobile. So you'll do a say category name equal to mobile. This is your where condition. You would have where condition after where condition. Probably if you're doing a something aggregate on top of it, you'll do a group by, right? And there is a having clause on top of group by. And at the end, there is always an order. Say not always, but your order by will be always at the end of the SQL statement. Yeah, there is a question, Abhishek.
Hello, Danish.
Yeah.
Are you sharing this query? I think you are not sharing the screen.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Okay, okay, okay.
Sorry to
Uh,
interrupt. Thanks.
no, thanks. Okay, so what I was just saying is, okay, I was just talking about this. So I was saying that you will have a select statement, columns, product join product category, and you'll have an on, right? And we'll always do alias. So if I'm using an alias here, yeah, I'm using PR and PC as alias here for the table names, and I'll do the category ID join. So usually what I was talking about is that if you have a select statement, the format of the select statement is always like this, where you say select from, right? You select all the column names from here, all of the things. You could write analytical functions or whatever you want to do from your table names or your source data, right? Tables. You will do all the join conditions here, and after the joins are there, then you will write a where condition. Say, like for example, you're doing a category name equal to mobile. Then you will have a group by. Say if you have written anything here as an aggregate function, sum of something, as well as you have written like a ID of something, then you will have to put your ID as your group by. You don't have to mention what things you have written as sum, but all other columns should be in your group by. So you have say for ID, you have name, then you have to write here name, right? So that the data is grouped by all other non-aggregated columns. And there is a having clause. Having clause usually runs on the aggregated columns. So having sum of so and so column greater than say 100. This is my save column something which I was selecting here. So this is greater than 100. And at the end, you will do a order by, let's say, name. So the thing here is their order by is always at the end of the statement. So if you write anything after order by in the SQL statement, you'll get an error everywhere, right? Everywhere means at in any database systems, you'll do an order by is your end of the statement. Because after that it's not going to fetch or anything, it's just going to be order by is only used for representation purpose. So your data fetching calculation is already done, and then it just represented the order you want and it is shown to you. Okay, I think there's a lot of things I tried to cover. I hope it made sense to you all guys. Have any questions? Do you have any questions? We want to talk about any other topic of the database related things.
I just wanted to know what is the difference between super key and non-key attributes.
So non-key attributes are the ones that are not part of your key. So super key is basically the combination superset of the keys that can uniquely identify your data, but all other attributes, right? See, for example, in this file, uh, the document. So if you have anything like this, right? So you have a segment, country, and all these things, right? Now, if I add something like, say, a product color here, a product color, then that is not really required. Or say, for example, if I go here, right, this is my total marks. Total marks is not going to be defining my uniqueness here. So that's my non-key attribute for this particular table.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. 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 I think a lot of messages I had not seen because I was sharing the screen. What are the career opportunities in database? What are the scopes of job opportunities for freshers in database? Okay. So as I mentioned at the beginning, right? So your databases are now becoming a key criteria for all the job roles. So even if you are a developer, web developer, or anyone, someday you will need to go into database to validate your data. What you are seeing on your web page is same or not. So if you are maybe you're into statistics or something, then you'll have to go and write some SQL queries somewhere or the other. So a job opportunity for database specifically are there and have been there from a long time. Which are like database administration. You could be a database developer. You could be a report developer who writes SQL queries on top of it. You could be a business analyst or analyst, data analyst, who write and make sense of the data and give reports to business. Right, so opportunities are there. Specifically for database, if you talk about from a hardware perspective or for a application perspective, the database administration part comes into picture, where the database admin people are the ones who are responsible for running the database, not looking into the data, but running the database. So just to give an example, we talked about, say, MongoDB, right? So if you're just using MongoDB for your application, it's not just that one instance of MongoDB will be running for your application. You'll have to run two, three, four, five, multiple instances of MongoDB as a cluster. So cluster is a concept wherein you create multiple instances serving the same purpose. So as a cluster, you will run MongoDB. You have to manage the cluster in such a way that every node gets equal load. So your load is balanced across the nodes. And if suppose anything goes down, if there is some upgrade, you have to do it. So there are a lot of challenges doing that, and there's a lot of work and a lot of risk involved in that. And that risk is usually handled by the database administrator teams. And that is the core database related work specifically. But if you look at the data related work is different. So database related work is this, but data related work is where you are creating reports, you are writing SQL statements, you are you know analyzing the data, you're doing data mining, you're doing probably writing SQL statements from different databases and merging them together into a report. So you're a report developer. So there's kind of opportunities are there for data. Scope of database management system, I think, related to AI. Is there any researches going on in this field? field of AI research is going on, but I didn't understand, Prasad. What exactly are you talking about? So database management system related to AI, you want to understand how those work, or a scope of database in job? How are you?
Yes, sir. Uh, is my voice clear, sir?
Yes, 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 yes.
Yes, sir. Actually, I was asking about the artificial intelligence systems in database. Means, is there any scope going on in this field?
So you are in AI field and you want to go in database field. Is that you are asking, or the other way around?
No, sir. Particularly about database management system.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So as I said, right, database has a scope, but definitely you'll see more things, more kind of different work coming up when you're in a data field. Even if you're in a AI or a data science field, right? If you think that if you are maybe into
I mean, sir, is there any collaboration of artificial intelligence or contribution of artificial intelligence in database?
yes, yes. So the databases such as BigQuery, right, has inbuilt support for uh, a lot of analytical functions in a way which cater to data science. Even many other systems are coming up with the similar concepts where you can write a SQL-like statement but find a correlation between different values in different fields. So that's the kind of functionality many databases are including internally, and that's what the support database support for the AI team is.
Okay, sir.
Okay, and for even if you are into AI field, you want to get into there, right, but it still never be will be the same way, because you'll have to write some sequels to extract data and understand data first before you do anything. Even if you are like an AI the lead scientist, you still have to go into data and see, basically, write SQL and see how they are joining together. You have to
Okay,
understand the
sir.
data. That will always be there.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay. What is the difference when filter condition of where clause is used in join clause? Will both give same result, and which should we prefer? Uh, so the filter condition, if you write in a where clause, right, it will take effect after the joins are completed. And if you write in a join clause, like say if the filter condition you write in join clause, then what will happen? Say if you're doing a left outer join. Yeah, that I think we missed. Thank you for that. So there is a different kind of joins. Left outer join will bring data from left table, right outer join from right table. Let's say that way. So if I'm just doing a product left outer join category, then I'm saying that I want all the products. And if the category doesn't exist for some of the products, let it be, but give me all the products. So if I put the where condition in join condition, right? So in that case, the result will be different if I put it in a where condition. So if I'm doing, say, name equal to mobile is my filter condition, which I put in a, say, product left outer join. Let me show. Let me write for you guys. Hmm, okay. So the same example. So if I do a product left outer join, right? So what would happen here is, if this is my on, if I do name equal to mobile, and if it is a left outer join, then I'm saying left join with product category only where name is mobile. So I'm creating a subset of my right column, basically, right table. But if I put this where condition after where, then I would say product left join product category, and whatever the result of this join condition is, apply the where condition. So obviously the result will be different. Okay. Which is website? Oh, there are a lot of websites to learn database. There are many. There are many. If you seen here just in our meeting, right? I did so many just searches. I never looked for any other thing. I just pick up anyone. But there are a lot of things. There is a Java Point. There is W3 schools, and plus I will say, go with the website that has maximum, which makes sense to you. Just read through multiple websites. There are different things in different websites. Pick two, three, which Guru 99 I found pretty useful while just trying to find some examples and topic for this session. So yeah, there are few, but no, there are many. There are many websites that give you database knowledge. Okay, I think we are on top of our time. I'll say thank you for everyone joining here. You can leave comment or if you like this session or not. Just I'll shoot a feedback for maybe to you guys. I plan to do more of this kind of sessions on database and other topics. So I'll need your feedback for that. How this went, what can we do better? And if you liked it, I have given you my access, right? You can reach out to me for anything if you want in future. If you really like this session, give me maybe write something on my LinkedIn, no problem. And probably see you around. Any other questions? If you have, send me a mail. You have my mail ID. I'll see what I can help you with, guys. Right? Sure, sure, Prasad. Thank you, everyone. I hope you. Thank you, Vaishnavi. I hope you enjoyed.
Thank you so much. It was a good session.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dinesh. Session was very
Thank you.
informative. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, guys. Yeah. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.